This is Stephen Kotler, and you're listening to Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hello, this is Dr. Raymond Moody, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, Cultural Creatives. I'm Bruce Lipton, and I'm here to join you with Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. I'm Trey Downs, and you're listening to Your Superior Self podcast, the podcast that helps us connect with that greatness inside of us. And today, to help us connect with that greatness, I have one of my favorite authors, Lynne McTaggart, joining the show. We're going to talk about, something called intention. We're going to talk about altered states of consciousness, brain waves, psychic connections, all of that fun stuff that I really enjoy reading about. And we're going to talk about, how our intentions can affect the past or the future. It's all under that umbrella that Lynne investigates and reports in her books that immediately go to bestsellers and help the world to better understand the field and how our intentions are so powerful and how we can use them to help create better lives for ourselves. Yeah, it is fantastic work, and I can't thank Lynne enough for doing that. So, just to give you a little bit of a preview of what's to come, I have a small clip for you about Lynne talking about one of her studies.
But in this Power of 8 group or large intention group with intention experiment or intentions of the week, we get to psychically connect. And that does create a state that is like an altered state. And the brainwave studies we've done on that has verified it. We've worked with Life University, which is the largest chiropractic university in the world. And their neuroscientists did a series of studies on our Power of 8 groups using student volunteers who were total novices, never did this before. Most of them hadn't even meditated. And every single one essentially showed brainwave changes that weren't consistent with meditation at all. And that's what shocked us. They were much more like a Buddhist monk involved in ecstatic prayer or a Sufi master during chanting. And those kinds of brainwave signatures had been verified by the University of Pennsylvania, studying those kinds of people. That's exactly what Power of 8 groups intention experiments reveal, is that we are in a state of ecstatic oneness.
And if you too want to be a part of that oneness, you can head over to LynneMcTaggart.com and you can go to her experiment section, click on that, go to Intentions of the Week, and there you can find 3 individuals who need your intentions, good intentions, positive intentions, to help them overcome any diversity that they're experiencing in their lives right now. And they do this every Sunday. And it's very easy. All you have to do is take a few deep breaths, hold the intention statement in your mind that she provides while imagining the first person being healthy and well in every way. Send that intention out from your heart and feel the collective energy of Lynne's community members who are joining you in that moment. And after 10 minutes of doing that, release the intention and move on to the next person. And I promise you, you will feel a part of the oneness. You will feel something. You will feel the field. You will feel vibration. You will feel the energy that is being collected in that moment. I have done it 3 times in a row, 3 weeks in a row. And each time I have felt that oneness that I didn't know it was oneness at first. I didn't know what was going on. It was more like a vibration. It was more of a feeling and energy uplifting, a very high vibration. And I like it. And so I try to make it a practice now whenever I'm conscious to what day it is when weekends, 3 kids. When I remember it's Sunday, I head over to Lynne McTaggart's website and I try to send out positive intentions for these people to help them along their path to recovery in whatever situation they may be in. I am super excited about this conversation. I am excited for you to listen to this conversation. But before I get into it, I want to set my intention for you listening to this podcast right now for the upcoming week. I hope that you guys remember who you truly are. I hope that you remember the power that we have inside of us to connect with everything around us. I hope that you admire yourselves. I hope that you remember and love yourself unconditionally and trust unconditionally in the being that you are, that everything will unfold the way that it should. And with that said, without further ado, here is the great and the powerful Lynne McTaggart.
What's up, everybody? I'm on Your Superior Self and looking forward to speaking to you.
Lynne McTaggart, this is a treat. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've read basically every piece of your work. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're across the pond, but thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
How did you get over there? You're a Jersey girl, right?
I'm a Jersey girl. Absolutely. Well, I came over to write a book. It was a biography of one of the Kennedys who had married a British lord and lived most of her young life over here, sister of John Kennedy. And I was supposed to stay just a few months, and I've stayed over 30 something years. And I got derailed and, met my husband and put down roots here. I've raised 2 daughters, wonderful daughters, and, started everything here.
He didn't derail you, did he?
Sorry, I'm still connected as an American, but, very much rooted here now.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's not the one who derailed you, right? Like you said, you got derailed over there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the derailments.
So yeah, your work is about the quantum field, right? Like the idea that everything is connected to everything else, even people. Talk about that. So you started out in New Jersey. You wanted to be a writer growing up. You got into investigative reporting, right? And then you started uncovering baby selling rings. That's got to be interesting. Like that's got to be some crazy work.
It was. I mean, it was my first big story. I actually posed as an unwed mother. I was about 23 at the time, I think, and then as a prospective adoptive parent, and got connected essentially by accident with some of these large-scale baby sellers. There was one guy who was importing pregnant women from Germany at a time when abortion was illegal, and bringing them to the States and having their babies adopted by, wealthy New York couples. And there was another guy who set up a Caribbean home for the unwed. Basically, I uncovered all of these baby selling scams around. And the of course, big part of it was there was nothing on the law books that made it illegal, even though thousands of dollars of cash would be passed over. And people were not really screened for their appropriateness as an adoptive parent. So it was that kind of thing I was doing. I had hidden tape recorders and, all kinds of things that I was doing back then. And the great thing about that background is that kind of investigatory nature has never left me. So I've tried to apply that kind of rigorous look at research to the stuff I'm now doing on spirituality.
Mm. So you go from that, you bust a big ring of that. I'm assuming you're feeling great about your career and where you're headed. And then I think you're battling with some health issues, right? And you start looking into some alternative health modalities. And how did what was the next thing that kind of caught your eye as far as like alternative health? Like what was it that started you down that rabbit hole of researching, different modalities?
Okay, well, there was a biography in between, and that's what brought me over here. But I got ill when I was in my early 30s, and no one seemed to know what was wrong with me. And I went from conventional doctors to alternative practitioners to the very outer rim of alternative practitioners, and no one could figure it out. A lot of tests got taken and there were just no answers. I mean, it was back in the days before people understood what a faulty microbiome was. Now it's, really commonplace. But that's what was going on with me. And I had a collection of really weird symptoms. So I finally got fed up with this process and said to myself, well, if I'm going to get better, I'm going to have to research this myself. I'm going to have to take charge of this myself. So I researched what I thought I had. And then I found a real pioneer nutritional doctor who was, one of the first, certainly in the UK, doing this, and a handful in the US too. And so I went to him and he got me better, but we worked as a team. And that's what was really impressive to me. It wasn't that typical doctor-patient relationship where, they're the parent and you're the child just following orders. We worked as a team. And so I came out of that experience thinking, it'd be great if everybody had this kind of information. And my then husband, one of the derailing parts of my staying in the UK, is also a journalist. And he said, well, stop telling me, tell the world. So we launched what was a newsletter at the time, What Doctors Don't Tell You. And, he'd come from an investigative background too. So this really fit. And it also reminded me of work I had done in the beginning of my career as an editor of a newspaper syndicate. I had helped to launch a column called People's Doctor by Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, who was this wonderful, kindly Jewish doctor who was on the licensing board of Illinois, and yet was this rabid revolutionary, writing about how medicine was dangerous and unproven in many regards. And so that had left a deep impression on me. He was really questioning all the sacred cows of medicine. And so that also was a big influence on our starting What Doctors Don't Tell You. And of course, it's now an international magazine 30 years later. And we do exhibitions called Get Well and a variety of things that are all involved with alternative medicine that works. So we're not interested in the real woo-woo stuff. We still want evidence that works. We have a team of doctors as panel members. We have a scientific proofreader and production editor. So we make sure the stuff is correct. So again, it's that investigative background that I try to, have available all the time with everything that I do.
Sure. No, I agree. You got to have that, right? It's how you validate your work. How did you, when did you start investigating the field though? When did that concept of that book come about?
Oh, Trey, that was a complete accident because I was studying this medical literature. This is back in the 90s, I guess the early mid 90s. And I kept coming across really good studies showing that spiritual healing actually works, and acupuncture and homeopathy work, good scientific studies. And I kept thinking, particularly about spiritual healing, if you can take a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, that in itself undermines everything we think about how the world works. So I got an idea to try to find out why this works. And I thought at the time there may be something like human energy fields. I wasn't really sure, but I managed to convince my publisher to let me go on a journey essentially without a compass. And I started talking to some frontier doctors and frontier physicists and frontier scientists of every variety, just to see if they could try to explain to me why this works. And what I realized was what they had all been doing was essentially working on a small piece of what together compounded into a completely new view of the world, a completely new science. And so that work, and at the heart of it, was the idea that we're not these separate entities, and we aren't these well-behaved, solid and stable entities as we've been told since the days of Isaac Newton. And separate beings on this little separate planet in a lonely universe. We are all intrinsically interconnected through this giant quantum energy field. And so that I started looking into all of their research, and that really changed the messenger.
How Newtonian were you before this book? Like, how mechanistic mindset did you have? Like, I feel like you come in here as an investigative reporter to, stumble upon the field. You start looking at research studies and data and the literature, and now you're kind of like, what? And you kind of like, you're down this rabbit hole and you start seeing that the science is starting to support a lot of data that is like, man, we just can't explain a whole lot, right? Like, I mean, look at non-locality, the intelligent observer effect, or I mean, all of these things that quantum physics are producing that scientists cannot explain. However, we're still in this mechanistic and Newtonian science type of environment. How Newtonian were you at the very beginning?
Well, I think I was always a questioning type of person, but I wasn't, and I was always into nutrition very early and TM very early and all of that kind of stuff. But I was pretty standard science. And I think that, as I say, first reading Robert Mendelssohn, again, sort of shocked me that medicine was that bad, that unproven, and that brutal at times. And so when you have a questioning nature, you question all sorts of things. So it wasn't a big leap to start saying, aha, this does this, this does that. But what I hadn't ever thought about was the idea that our whole scientific basis is now out of date and there's a new science emerging. So that was completely new. And in studying all of that, putting it all together, and the big piece for me was not only having to learn quantum physics, but also having to try to synthesize all of their disparate ideas, because scientists are known for two things. One, they talk in a kind of code, they talk in math. And then the other part of it that's difficult is they don't want to stray beyond their own experimental data to say, well, what does this all mean? So I really had to do that. But I was almost engaging in a Socratic dialogue with them all the time to try to understand everything that they were uncovering and the big implications. So and I think in the process of doing that, which was immensely hard, that first book in the area was really, really hard. That really changed the messenger, because when you suddenly understand that life is nothing like what you've been told, and that, if we are part of a giant field, if we're all essentially connected, if things like non-locality exist and observer effect, when we see things, we essentially create it. If all of that is true, that changes everything. That changes everything about how we put together our world, how we live our lives, how we bring up our children, and I realized everything had to be rewritten essentially from ground up. So that realization really set me on this path and these books and this work.
I love how you take the data, the science, the literature, and you interweave it with a story. Like, you have a main spinal, like from point A to point B, like story, like you're trying to convey. And then in between that, you have branches of like scientists and their information and their data and their literature, and you kind of weave their story in without this main focus. I mean, the field for me was fun to read because it wasn't just like your story, it was everyone else's that has contributed to the science. The one thing I wanted to read for everybody at the very end of it, was really just kind of like blew my mind, was that, all of these scientists are starting to find out, like you had said, that the previous science is out of date, and that consciousness of human beings has incredible powers to heal ourselves, to heal the world, and in a sense, to make it as we wish it to be. I was blown away by that, because again, this kind of supports the idea that we create our reality with thought, with consciousness, with our minds. And you follow this book up with the intention experiment, where you go into a lot more scientific evidence of intention, and how, like, my favorite experiment in there is when they had the plant, and they hooked the lie detector test up to this thing, and they start like giving it harmful thoughts, and it starts like reacting to it. I mean, I thought to myself, I was like, how did she ever come up with this stuff? Like, how did you find these scientists, and how did you get them? Like, was this already published, or did you have them do this experiment while you were writing?
No, this was well afterward. If you're a reporter, if you're a journalist, you learn how to get a thread wherever it is. You start somewhere, and then you just keep pulling on it as though you're pulling on a great big ball of string. And that's what you do. You look at one thing and that leads you to something else. And if you interview somebody and you say, yeah, wow, that's really interesting. Who else do you know like this? Or in the course of it, they may speak of somebody else. And so you just know to follow it up. And I guess probably one of the big advantages I have as a journalist is no stone unturned. I just have this mindset that I just have to do it until there's no more left, and research until there's no more left. So that mindset has really held me in good stead. But finding that was Cleve Baxter, I can't remember how I heard about him, but I just heard about him. And he had actually published some of his stuff, and he published a book called Primary Perception, but I interviewed him as well for the book, for the intention experiment.
Yeah, I don't think he was a scientist. I think he was like worked in some type of official capacity, like maybe with government or some police or FBI or something like that. I remember. And then my favorite is when you hook up with Gary Schwartz and you guys start doing the seed intention experiments. How'd you hook up with Gary, Dr. Schwartz?
Again, I think I found him in the midst of researching for the intention experiment. And when I had finished that, the plan with my intention experiment was really to work on some unfinished business that I'd had from the field. The field had a lot of implications in a lot of the work there, which was the idea that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. So again, being hard-nosed journalist, I said to myself, and this was all the time when The Secret was coming out and all of this stuff about law of attraction. And I said, well, okay, if thoughts are an actual something that can change physical matter, how far can we take this? Are we talking about, shifting a quantum particle, something minute, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? So I wanted to test it. So the idea of the intention experiment was not just to just write about all of the evidence for intention, which I did, but also to start doing experiments, mass experiments, because I thought, well, I know a lot of scientists in this area now who are doing consciousness research. And I also have a lot of readers because the field was in 30 languages by then. And I just thought, if I put them together, I'm going to have the biggest global laboratory in the world. So that's what we did. And Gary, I had heard about Dr. Schwartz because of the afterlife experiments, but also because he had done some initial intention experiments that sounded really interesting. Experiments with intention, having healers and intention, positive or negative, to bacteria and things like that. So I contacted him, and in the course of doing it, I always knew I was going to do those experiments. And I think I must have asked him, hey, you want to do these? And he said, yeah, I love this. And so we started really from ground zero, just saying, well, I don't know how long this is going to be. Let's see what we do. We started with an audience of about 400 in London. So we were in London. I was in London in front of this audience. Gary was with his lab in Tucson, Arizona. And also the great thing about Gary Schwartz is he had a whole consciousness lab that was being funded by the NIH, by the National Institutes of Health. So he had a great deal of equipment and facilities for consciousness research, and he had the time to devote to this. So we did things trying to change, the basic properties of a leaf, like the light emissions. And we had success. And so we just built on that. So the seed experiment you're talking about, we ran that 12 times. And every single time the seeds sent intention. We'd have 4 sets of seeds. And I would have an audience if I was speaking in front of someplace, or the internet audience, if I invited my readers to come on my website and do it. Choose one. We wouldn't let the scientists know which set of seeds we were choosing. We'd send intention to grow faster than the others to that set of seeds. We'd tell the scientists we were done. They would plant the seeds and measure them 5 days later, the seedlings, and only then would we unblind the studies. So first one I ran with that was in Sydney, Australia. So just let's unpack it. And by the way, every single time we ran the studies, wherever it was, the seed sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. So with Sydney, let's just think about this for a second. I'm in Sydney, Australia with my audience of 700. The seeds are in Tucson, Arizona. I think it's about 8,000 miles away. Plus, we're not sending intention to the seeds themselves that are sitting in that lab in Tucson. We're sending intention to a photo of the seeds. And nevertheless, we're having an effect. Mm-hmm. So that really is an amazing change in our perception of our effect over time and distance. What it really suggests is that with the power of intention, of thought, we create essentially a psychic internet that can affect things around the world. And I've seen that now. We've run about 38 intention experiments, and all but 4 have shown positive, measurable, mostly significant effects.
That's so fascinating to me, which then leads to your work now, the power of 8 with intention. And I've done it 3 weeks in a row now. It's Sunday, I think, between 1 o'clock, I think it is on Eastern, 1:10. And I have to tell you, I don't know if it's because I know that people are sending intentions to some of these people, but when I get into into the state of intentionally sending good vibes out to this person, I feel different. I feel like I'm vibrating almost. I don't know. Each time it's been 3 weeks in a row. It's been pretty powerful. Do you get I'm assuming that you guys, when you put these pictures out and their bios and what's going on with them, that you track them over time and see if these intentions are working. I'm very curious, what is the data showing for these individuals when you put their pictures out? You're not even you could be 3,000 miles away. You have a mass collection of people sending intention at the same time. What are the effects? What is the data showing?
Okay. So I should explain to everybody, every Sunday, we do a thing called Intention of the Week. So my entire community sends intention to 3 people that we nominate. People send in their pictures of loved ones or relatives or somebody with a health issue. And so we pick 3 each time. And we've been doing this since 2007 with the very first one. And we don't have absolute scientific data because we have to wait for people to tell us if anything has happened. And we will write to them and say, every so often, has anything changed? And what we have found is a remarkable amount of the time, there is an improvement. There have been total healings. And the interesting thing, as you say, one of the most recent is a woman who wrote in to me, Gina Mele, about her mother. And her mother was really suffering from all kinds of symptoms, heart symptoms, and breathlessness. And after our intention, the breathlessness was so much better, almost gone. We got another guy, we've had numerous people with cancer where the cancer's been reversed. We've had somebody who was in a wheelchair whose pain got reversed. We had a premature baby that looked like she was going to die and was healed and went on and got out of the hospital, and so on and so forth. We had so many stories like this that we let everybody know about. But another thing that's happened that's really amazing is what happens to the sender. And this I've also tried to catalog a bit. We had one woman who had terrible arthritis. She was a painter and couldn't paint anymore. And after she started doing the intentions of the week, she realized her hands, which were gnarled, suddenly they cleared. I don't know if it was overnight, but she suddenly realized her hands were so much better and she's back to painting. We also have many, many people write in all the time, whether it's my intention experiments, the intentions of the week, even Power of 8 groups, to talk about how being part of this group intention creates a kind of altered state for them. And I've tried to analyze this too over the years. And I find the real secret sauce here is we don't really get a chance to enter a state of oneness, to really experience being in the field. Most of the time we live in our own little separateness. But in this Power of 8 group or large intention group with intention experiment or intentions of the week, we get to psychically connect. And that does create a state that is like an altered state. And the brainwave studies we've done on that has verified it. We've worked with Life University, which is the largest chiropractic university in the world. And their neuroscientists did a series of studies on our Power of 8 groups using student volunteers who were total novices, never did this before. Most of them hadn't even meditated. And every single one essentially showed brainwave changes that weren't consistent with meditation at all. And that's what shocked us. They were much more like a Buddhist monk involved in ecstatic prayer or a Sufi master during chanting. And those kinds of brainwave signatures had been verified by the University of Pennsylvania, studying those kinds of people. That's exactly what Power of 8 groups intention experiments reveal, is that we are in a state of ecstatic oneness when we do this. And that's why you feel this tingling, this energy, this, overwhelm. I mean, I have oftentimes felt such heat coming from my computer that I have to stand away from it. And it's not the computer, because as soon as it's done, it feels normal again. So there is an extraordinary thing going on here.
I love every bit of that. So you talk about you had groups of 400 and you were sending intention, miles and miles away to this seed. And then you start, making changes and narrow it down to a group of 8. That is, I don't know if that's the smallest you can have to have the biggest effect, but you've narrowed it down to 8. You have this book, The Power of 8. And now you're creating this research that is changing our perception on altered states, meditation. I mean, altruism. I guess my question is, can one person like myself, if I decide to, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, start sending positive intentions to other people that are in need, can I receive the same effects from that intention as the groups of 8?
I think it gets powered up in groups. From what I've seen, and certainly the feedback I've had from many of my students, I remember one woman, Andy Spiros, saying she's an experienced meditator, experienced intention setter and sender, said there is something about the groups that changes things. And I can't get that kind of reaction, effect, and basically rebound effect from anything else. And I've tried. So many, many people say the groups make something else. And I talked about that sense of oneness, but you also touched about something else that's really important, which is altruism. One of the great things about a Power of Eight group is most of the time you're giving to someone else. And when I've studied the science of altruism is like the ultimate bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people, no matter how small, taking out your neighbor's garbage, for instance, those people or volunteers live longer, healthier, happier lives consistently through all of the studies. Plus, if you're sick with something and you help someone else with the same illness, you're more likely to be healed. So what I have observed over the years with Power of Eight groups, and by the way, you asked, it doesn't have to be 8. It can be 5. It can be 12. 8 is a number I came upon by accident, and 8 is kind of a Goldilocks figure. So it's not too big, it's not too small. I think when you get more than 12, it can be unwieldy if you're first starting out, and less than 5, unless you're really connected with those people, doesn't really constitute a group. So it's a group effect of giving. And when you learn to do this and to give selflessly, that's when I see there are responses responses among the senders as well as the receivers. I'll give you an example. One of my favorites is a guy called Wes Chapman, who was a Vietnam vet and 65 when I met him. And he had given up on life. He had big plans as a young man in college. He was going to be a doctor or a biochemist, bright man. And yet he got drafted at the very last year of the Vietnam War when there were no student deferments. So he went to war, and it was so traumatic for him, right there on the front line. Comes back, he's so depressed and traumatized, he drops out of university, drops out of college, and his life takes a downward spiral, situation after situation. Even when he meets the love of his life, his second wife, she didn't last long. She had a fast-growing cancer. She dies, and he's left not only bereft, but also with terrible, terrible medical bills. So even has to sell his house. So his life was like that. And so by the time I met him, he'd given up. It was hard to even get up in the morning. So I had put together some Power of Eight groups at a church in Denver, the Mile High Church. He was one of those experimental groups. And he gets in the group, and he was going to nominate himself because he was suffering from such depression. But he realized that another woman in the group had stage 4 cancer. So he felt she was more deserving. So he was just a sender. So after they do it, that night, he wakes up the next morning and the day after the intention, and he realizes his senses are all heightened. A cup of herbal tea tastes amazing. The flowers are more brilliant than he's ever seen, that kind of thing. Then the next night, when he goes to sleep, he has this essentially vision. It was a really weird dream. He imagines he's met his 19-year-old self on campus. And somehow that 19-year-old self, back at his university, somehow that 19-year-old self communicates to him, don't worry, there's still time. Now that experience completely changes Wes. The next day, he suddenly has all this energy. Chores are fun to do. He's getting up. It's easy to do them. He goes down the street and he wants to say hi to everybody he meets. He's just suddenly in love with the world. And he has stayed changed. He suddenly got into exercise, started working in Power of Eight groups as his church. He had been avoiding people. Now he's involved with people, studying more things, writing. His life was changed with one Power of Eight group. Extraordinary. But it was that one act of altruism, without any thought of what was going to come back to him, because I didn't even tell everybody, oh, it's going to be good for you too. That that's what really made the difference. And I've seen that over and over and over again in my classes with my students. This remarkable effect, both for the receivers and the senders.
Oh man. Yeah, I've seen returns unexpectedly, like putting out really like meaningful intention for someone who was in need, and just seeing like random things pop up that I can't, explain. But how was your data? How is your work? Like, how has it shaped your spirituality? Like, has it changed it dramatically? Are you still curious about the universe? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, goodness. I'm endlessly curious about the universe. Yeah, I think there's more to write about with what's really going on in the world, what the universe is really comprised of. What really fascinates me now is exploring all of our hidden human capacity. We're at a point in time, particularly right now, where technology is taking over. And we're believing that somehow we need to be enhanced as human beings. And what I'm looking at and investigating and seeing and practicing and teaching is the innate capacity we have inside us already that has been denied to us and minimized from the time we've been children, that we have capacity that will outstrip any possible technology that can be invented. We have the capacity to create. We have the capacity to heal. We have the capacity to see beyond our senses. We have the capacity to transcend time. In my courses, in some of my more advanced courses, and even in some of my basic courses, I teach people how to use intention for time travel. And that's also been some of the stuff that I'm really investigating at the moment. So,
oh, that's right. I did watch something on time travel. You got me hooked. Like, so can you just talk about that real quick?
Sure. I mean, what's really interesting is that we've discovered that our brain can't really distinguish between the past and the future. And I started looking at a lot of the evidence about time. I mean, one wonderful study that I'll tell you about had to do with an Israeli professor who wanted to debunk alternative medicine by putting it through the rigors of a scientific study. So he got together a group of patients suffering from sepsis, which is a life-threatening blood disorder. And he put them into two groups. One group just got the normal medicine, and the other group got normal medicine, plus they were prayed for by a healer, just somebody praying. It wasn't even a healer. I think it was just somebody who was religious. So afterward, he thought this would be wonderful because it would finally show you can't study alternative medicine by the scientific method. So he does the study, very rigorously designed, and finds out to his consternation that the people who were prayed for were better in every regard. They got out of the hospital sooner, they had less pain, they were just better, they got better faster. So he wrote this up in the Lancet, figuring it would debunk alternative medicine, but that's not what happened, because the big kicker to the study was that the healing went on in the year 2000. The patients had been in the hospital between the years of 1994 to 1996, 4 to 6 years earlier. So that was the issue, is he actually had got a batch of records of patients that had been in the hospital, randomly, put them together, and one is one pile and one's in another pile. And yet it came out that the patients who got the prayer got better, even though they'd already left. So somehow those intentions had gone back in time and somehow affected them. At least that's how people saw it when it was published in the Lancet. It was universally believed that he had just demonstrated that you can go back and change the past. Now, I've looked at a lot of research about this, and there's a lot of robust research about retro intention. Everything from trying to make gerbils run on their activity wheels after they've run, to the flow of traffic, to even changing your breathing after you've done it. I mean, all kinds of mind warping stuff. But what's been really probably the most compelling is evidence showing, if there's been studies done by, for instance, Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, of a two-part process, finding that the speed at which the second part of the process is done, listen to this carefully, affects the speed at which you do the first one. So the future affects the present, essentially. So what he and many, many scientists believe is, number one, time is a human construct. You know, time is a forward-going arrow, is a human construct. It's much more like one big smeared out now. And it probably is, the future is affecting the present as it unfolds. So I've been doing a lot of work in retro-intention, where we change not what happened, but what one person responds to. And I do this, and I teach this in many of my classes. We go through a bunch of technique and process, and it's been extraordinary. I've even seen people, healed from all kinds of trauma, even the worst kind of trauma, sexual abuse, etc., using this technique. I've also seen even health issues healed. There was one woman, I was doing it in a workshop, and actually her hand, she had vitiligo, where you lose pigment. Her hand was repigmenting. I swear it to you. It was extraordinary. So my forays into this, I'm working more and more in the whole time travel, intention in and out of time. And that is probably the most mind warping. But as I say, every physicist will tell you now, studying some of this work, that there's no such thing as time. And even the late Robert John from Princeton University, when I was first researching the field, and I said, how can this all be? And he said, simple, Lynn, take time out of it, and it all makes sense. And, it's imperative now to take time out of it, because we realize that, essentially the real secrets of the universe sit above time.
Mm. Yeah, there's so, like, every time you come up with some new research, you just blow my mind away. Like, it was the field learning, I felt like I was learning while you were learning the concepts, and then the power of 8, and now intention with time. It seems like we don't know a lot of what we thought we did, right? Like, it's kind of exciting, and it's kind of scary because it's like, what is reality? Like, I want to believe that I see, like, that wall stays there when I don't look at it, right? Or the moon's there when I like Einstein says, I like to think that the moon's there even though I'm not looking at it. But again, it's like, what is reality? I have this idea of, when you imagine yourself in the future, like when you're setting intentions and law of attraction, like when you have this vision of where you want to go, it's kind of like the observer effect, where you visualize it and then it's birthed in that moment of a reality that it could be your reality, but it's up to you to pull yourself to it through, I don't know, maybe your work ethic and maybe your vibration and your path. But there's just so much of reality and what we truly are out there that is a big question mark. And like, that's why, this podcast is a big tool for me to learn, because I wouldn't be doing this without this, right? Like it started with like one psychology book about, I can't even remember what it was about now. And now I can't get enough of it, right? Like, your work has been a big inspiration for me as far as setting intention and helping others through altruism and following your story and how you're helping the world. I can't thank you enough for the work that you've done.
Thank you, Trey. One thing to say too about it, it can be unsettling when we suddenly realize and really take in that the universe isn't what we thought. But it's also hugely liberating. Let's just face it. The universe isn't in a very good place right now.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I wrote about a lot in my third book in this area, The Bond, was that, it's the end of something. right now. We're seeing the end of so much of what we had in terms of our understanding of the world, our liberal democracy. So much is change and changing and not particularly pleasant right now. So I think this new science gives us a new understanding of the possibilities that we hold within ourselves and that have never been used, or certainly not used here in the West. You know, the capacity we have in intention to heal ourselves, to heal each other, to heal the world is just unbelievable. And that is what I think is the big message, that yes, it's okay to let go of that very old, static, out of date idea. It's as out of date as so many other fashions of the 1700s. And that's the thing we have to get behind too. Science, we always think of it as this finite truth. But science is just a story. And with every new generation, new chapters are written that supplant the ones that were written before. And so we're right now rewriting this book. And so it may seem like an upheaval, but it's also a huge liberation. And I'm excited by it. I'm excited by everything I discover, because I realize we have so much more capacity than we've been told. And it's time to unleash it, never more than now.
That's beautiful. I know we're coming up on time. Like, what are you trying to create for yourself now? Like, what is it that you're setting an intention for? I know you're doing a lot of great work for other people, but what is Lynne McTaggart? What are you trying to achieve?
I think more of the same. I'm sure I have another book or two or three in me. I working a lot on courses. I have a brand new course coming up called Intention Essentials, which is a foundation course, because what I'm finding is, intention takes certain techniques, and people have a lot of half-digested ideas about it and invariably do it wrong and wonder why it doesn't work. So I created a foundation course for people to understand, exactly how to word it, how to work in a group, all of that kind of thing. And people can find out about it on lynnmctaggart.com under Intention Essentials, kicking off October 2nd. For me personally, I hate to say this because it's not been an easy life, but I've had a fantastic life. I have a wonderful husband. I have two gorgeous grown-up daughters, one of them which is married. I have a wonderful team. We're working on a lot of health things. We're doing get well shows. We've got an international magazine. But now I think what I really want for myself is what I want for the world. I feel like, I'm of a generation that was at the very tail end of the Vietnam War, holding up placards. I mean, I was just a high school student, but we were still very engaged in all of that. But now it's time to dust those placards off again. I think there is a real call to an active engagement to change the world now. So for me, the real important, calling for me that's calling more than anything else is an activism to actively create this better world.
Beautiful. Well said. Lynne McTaggart, I can't thank you enough. This has been amazing. I don't know. I mean, your work it speaks for itself. I mean, you're changing the way that we look at reality. You're changing the way that we look at altruism. I mean, intention in a whole. I mean, you've definitely paved the way for new thinking.
Thank you so much, Trey. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.